A hoaxer comes back and challenges people and is pissed off at people for not investigating an alleged hoax that he perpetrated. Does that make any sense? Doesn't make sense to me. But we found out Victor was a government biologist. He was the caretaker of the 6 deceased aliens. We have 5 intel people telling it's real. I've emailed the one admiral in the room. I've talked to the widow of the doctor who comes in on the Bean's right. I spoke with the widow of the doctor on the Bean's right shoulder, our left. She identified her husband. And do you know what she said about her husband? There was a bone of contention between us. He never talked about his time in the U.S. Army Medical Corps. I never said Army Medical Corps, but that was on this memo that I was given by a whistleblower. And she said, John, all of our friends never understood why. And she said his nickname, would never talk about it. You calling me today, you have solved the riddle.
All Things Unexplained is free to watch on YouTube and listen to wherever you get your podcasts. If you would like to support our show, you can visit our YouTube store. Additionally, you can find us on Venmo under All Things Unexplained. Be sure to check out our website, allthingsunexplained.com. All proceeds from the sales of Dr. Mounce's books on Amazon and Audible also go straight to our show.
I am here to discuss the so-called flying saucers.
We know now that in the early years of the 20th century, this world was being watched closely by intelligences greater than man's.
Did the CIA write Wind of Change by the Scorpions?
As humans busied themselves about the various concerns, they were scrutinized and studied.
Dr. Loeb, what percentage chance do you give it that you have indeed uncovered extraterrestrial or non-human technology?
With infinite complacence, people went about their affairs, yet across an immense ethereal gulf, intellects vast and unsympathetic drew their plans against us.
All of a sudden, a stick out of nowhere landed right in front of us, and there was no tree, nothing overhead. Something threw it at us.
Yeah.
All Things Unexplained.
So some of that, I think, sir, we'll save for closed session.
Hey, all you unexplained ones. Welcome to All Things Unexplained. For this evening, I am Dr. Mouse, and I'm joined by my co-host, Smitty Neves. And this is quite an unusual situation tonight. This literally got put together about 20 minutes ago. Before we get started, I'd like to say, if you enjoy our content, and we've had a pretty outstanding week, and it's only getting better, ways you can support the show, please make sure to hit the subscribe button, comment on this show, hit the like button, and share what you're watching. Another way you can support, if you look right beside the chat bar, you'll see super chats and super stickers. If you have any questions for us or our guest tonight, please put them in all caps so that I can get them up. For our special guest that we would like to welcome, we really have to say thank you so much for being so flexible, because he's coming at us here at the very last second notice. Everybody, let's welcome Jon Stewart to the show tonight. Jon, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah,
You're
thank
welcome.
you, Jon.
Thank you for having me.
So, Jon, we're just going to dive right in, I think. So you have really brought back to limelight something that came out there in the 90s on this documentary, and it's an alien interrogation video. At least that's what it purports to be. What can you tell us about this?
It was 1997. I'm living in downtown Chicago. I tell this story not to impress anybody, by the way. Sounds like a beginning of a 30 for 30 ESPN documentary on myself. but it's how the story grabbed me. God, and I'm not getting religious here, but it said that when you least expect something, it happens, and when it happens, it usually grabs you, and it grabs you hard. This has stayed with me for 30 years. Again, it's 1997. I'm living this baller life in downtown Chicago. I'm at a high-rise condominium that I own. I'm driving a 8-year-old black Porsche. I've got a new boat on Lake Michigan. I'm a part-time pro wrestler on the weekends. I'm running for the Illinois House of Representatives. Kellyanne Conway, Donald Trump's former legal counsel, was my campaign consultant. I was a automobile remarketer, wholesaler, importer, and I'm dating this really, really sexy blonde woman who's been my wife now of 25 years. And I'm home one night and I see this on the UPN network, a startup network, uh, Area 51 alien interview. I must have been hit on my head too much with football and pro wrestling. I'm thinking alien interview, like a weird humanoid on closed circuit TV is going to be handing a clipboard to a general for like a job interview. So I've got can you just see the scenario? I've got my prep food and my drinks and my feet up on the recliner, and I'm ready to watch this, mockumentary. This is coming off the heels of the alien autopsy, so I'm rolling my eyes as it is. And 30 minutes into this documentary, of a what now we're being told was an alleged gray alien, I see a tan alien, Eben, with round eyes, not pointed almond eyes. I see medical staff coming in, and unlike the alien autopsy, the medical doctors look like they're ready to give some kid 3 stitches in the ER. They've got short sleeve scrubs, surgical mask, and surgical cap and gloves, no pressurized suits, and there's a chair off to the left corner. You've got 2 military men in the foreground, and you keep seeing their shoulders like this in the camera. I'm like, this is either the worst documentary ever made, and it was actually a well put together documentary, or this is like so casual, so mundane and routine that that's what we're seeing. This this alien's been here for a long time. It's another interview. Here's how it plays out.
We're talking
Sure.
about Area 51, the alien interview from 1997, the documentary. And the thing is, if you watch that, it's got a lot of recreations in there, but they are clearly recreations, right? Like if you see the
Right.
recreations, you say, okay, that's not real. But then when they show the alien interrogation slash alien interview, it's totally different. It's just
Right.
like, wow, what am I seeing here?
Exactly. You have people saying, "Oh, it's fake. Hollywood made it." Okay, fair enough. Dark room, and I'll explain that. But we see the production company making a imitation alien interview, and it looks like me and my 2 college age daughters did it in the family room, paper mache. And then you see this being that, again, far away shot, 1997. The hair started to get on the back, get a stand up on the back of my neck. I'm being completely legit. I'm not being melodramatic. But like I told you in the pre-interview, it was Victor's speech, his vernacular, that really grabbed me and said, I don't know what, but something is not right with this film. And I was around Troy Duffy, who was the writer director of The Boondock Saints. I was around that entire fiasco of him in Hollywood. I was on the periphery. I had friends who were friends with his. I was immersed in Hollywood as much as you can living in Chicago. I knew that there's no way a 20-something-year-old screenwriter could have wrote the speech and the answers to the questions of Victor. Victor uses 2 terms that really grabbed me and made me say something's not right. He uses a terminology called medically flagging. He says the being starts to flag. And he also talks about that the being is in the interview suite. I think every single one of us writing this out, if this was a hoax, would have put the interview room, the underground, room, the room, calls it a suite. And by
Interrogation
definition, is
chamber,
much, yeah, exactly.
prison
The
cell.
suite, psychologically, a suite is a much more comfortable accommodation. And psychologically, we find out 30 years later, Victor constantly repeats about the comfort of the alien, the comfort of the alien. So he is using a terminology that is backing up his own inner dialogue. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So he knows that the government is trying to keep the comfort of this creature, as best as possible, and he uses a terminology that backs up that that psychological verbal response, if I can get very technical and really sound intelligent, which I'm not. So I'm at a doctor's office, and we're going to speed up now. I'm in a doctor's office 2 weeks later getting my checkup. Dr. Z was a doctor in the medical corps in Korea. I'm like, Dr. Z, what is flagging? He's like, what? He's a real bombastic doctor. I love him. I said, what is medically flagging? He starts laughing at me. He said, where did you hear that from? I said, it was on a documentary. He said, I haven't heard that since, the 60s, this maybe the early 70s. It's an old term we used, in medicine, when the patient starts to medically flag. And I'm thinking to myself right away, wait a minute, 20-something-year-old screenwriter in Southern California without the internet knows the term medically flagging, an archaic medical term, and that might sound innocuous and minor to someone listening to me, but again, you have to looking at this of just trying to find the truth. I found it very hard to believe that a young screenwriter could come up with an archaic term that a 50 or 60-year-old doctor would only know. Again, before the internet. It's 2 years later, and again, on the bottom of this film is emblazoned, which is called digital overlay graphics, DNI/27. This is the bombshell. The number 27, guys, gentlemen, is the bombshell of my entire investigation, which I will get to later. And DNI says Victor claims that this is the Department of Naval Intelligence, the agency running the alien interview, and the agency running the alien program in this facility that Victor calls S4. So I run for Congress. I drop out of the race. I endorse a guy that eventually became the nominee and the candidate in United States congressman. He later became United States senator. He's retired now from Illinois. We get a U.S. senator who was in the Navy. I think you all could pretty much identify who he is. He's deceased now. Very prominent United States senator. And before we got back on the bus after one of his speeches, I said, Senator, took a picture with him. I said, what is the Department of Naval Intelligence? And I want to look in the camera and make sure you look in my eyes. This jovial, happy-go-lucky senator turned to me with these coal black eyes and an aggressive look. And he said, you don't need to know anything about that. Stormed off, walked on the tour bus, never spoke to me for the rest of the evening. Now I want to ask you something. I do roundups. I want to ask you something. Would you put a network quality documentary together showing an alien interview and paint the alien tan, give it round eyes instead of almond eyes? Would you bring in the medical doctors in short sleeve scrubs and not at least get them, you know, pressurized suits or even biohazard suits to really hype it up? Would a screenwriter who's 20 something years old in 96 really know archaic 1960s medical terms? And and would you put the abbreviation of a military intelligence agency that to this day officially does not exist? Why would you do that? You would put CIA, you would put S4, Area 51 on the bottom. Why would you purposely put abbreviation? Tell Victor to say it's the Department of Naval Intelligence when you could not verify that it even exists, and you can't even do it today with Google. The
Oh
Department
yeah.
Office, Department of Naval Intelligence.
How about
So
we do this, John? How
go ahead.
about we take a little peek at the alien interview? But I would
Let's
like
do
to
it.
ask you something though, just to backtrack for our listeners. I'm going to add this to the screen here, and what we're seeing here is Victor. Okay,
Yes,
and Victor is the one that is essentially, you would call him a whistleblower, right? He's essentially,
without a doubt.
yes, the
Mhm.
whistleblower
Yeah.
for the alien interview. Can you
Yep.
tell everybody exactly who you believe, or who we are to believe Victor is? What is
Well,
Victor's
without
story?
violating my production contract and my agent Sean West, being having to get CPR on the his kitchen floor, I'm not going to reveal Victor's full name, but now I will switch to just the play-by-play guy and just tell you everything I learned in my investigation because I am done selling people on, no, no, this really was told to me. This really happened to me, and so on and so forth. So here is the entire truth of the alien interrogation. First of all, it was not an interrogation; it was a thought projection interview. Thought projection is the word used by the DIA, the Defense Intelligence Agency, which runs the Alien Interrogation and Retention Program out at S2 Alpha. This is the annex, the top building that holds the floors, S4, that's so in Bob Lazar lore and in Victor's lore, where the alien interviews are conducted. But it is beneath a building called S2 Alpha, about 5 miles northwest of Papoose Lake. Victor is a deceased government biologist he's deceased. He was a government biologist at the time working for the DIA. He was the caretaker of the 6 deceased Ebens in glass, uh, full-size glass containment tubes. We think it's glass,
And I'm sorry,
filled with a
John, to interrupt
special
you. Can you tell everybody
okay,
what you mean by Ebens?
Ebens, the designation of the gray species, which is extraterrestrial biological entity, basically half organic being, and part machine or android. Literally a biologic android. Um, and we we I feel after talking to so many military intelligence people in these programs, that these beings were created by a taller race of grays, so these beings could withstand the rigors of space travel. Because what people won't tell you, we're never going to go to Mars. I hope you're listening to me. We will never go to Mars. We cannot stand the high rate of speed that it would take. If we're in space, deep space for 6 months, our brains would become like we would be Labrador retrievers or 10-year-old children. And it's never going to happen. So the beings have figured this out of how to traverse space. Either they send biological beings like you're seeing on the screen that are part machine, part organic, or they basically bend space and time, and they literally flip in and out of out of dimensions. And what David Grush refused to say in front of Congress was that some of these beings are interdimensional, and they slip in and out of dimensions about as easy as you and I crossing the street. Thus, not the need for having an organic, android type being operate in the craft. The craft is
Yeah.
operated in a
Let
symbiotic
me jump in
relation.
there real quick, John.
Okay. Okay.
So, I totally, you don't have to convince us that, they're not coming from far away places in the universe, or that we're not
Yeah.
going to Mars anytime soon, because already know. Next week, are we going to the moon? No,
No.
No.
we're not. Are we sending anybody to the
We threw
moon
the
next month?
technology out in the garbage. I'm
We're,
sorry.
we're just not doing it, right? And we have spoken to a lot of astrophysicists who have told us that, you know what, the evidence points to them just being here. They're just here somewhere.
Yeah.
Now, you could argue exactly where, but the dimensional situation you're talking about would certainly apply to them
Right.
being here and not traversing space. So
Right.
go ahead, John.
Yeah, and the being you're looking at right now is designated as the other gray. It is a haploid. It only comes with one sexual chromosome, where human beings are diploid. We have two sexual chromosomes. This particular being came from the Tau Ceti star system. His planet is very like the desert region in New Mexico and Arizona. Very, very bright sunlight. They have a hive mentality. This being did communicate that it did have a soul and it did have a family. And I have no idea. And I hope people can appreciate that I'm not a yes man and I know it all. I don't have no idea, no concrete proof, any concrete proof, sorry, of how this being came to the facility, the S2 Alpha facility in 1989. But we do know it came in 1989. It died briefly right after uh, this session, which would have been in 1991. Victor says this session took place in January of 91. It is not. It did not. This session you're looking at took place April 21st, 1991. It was conducted by the Department of Naval Intelligence. They were asking this being in this session, which lasted about 56 minutes, uh, about an object or something underneath the Indian Ocean. As crazy as this sounds, to your left, it's hard to see in this copy, but the original version, which was shown on the documentary, is an army general. Some people believe it's Colin Powell. He's to the foreground. To the right is Ted Schaefer. He was Colin Powell's chief of staff for intelligence. Hence, I'm going to get to 27 eventually. Remember those two names. There were three other military men in the room. Somebody from Army Intelligence, a person that was a Area 51 doctor named Craig McPherson, deceased, who Linda Moulton Howe actually interviewed back in 1995 before this documentary came out. As interesting that is, there was also two telepaths. I have a photo and the institution or the place where the telepath came from. This telepath and his co-telepath were very adept at communicating to this being and receiving the thought projections. These beings communicate in what's called thought projection. Think about it. If you're traversing planets where you don't know the language and you can have a hard time communicating, the best way to communicate with the indigenous people on that planet would be putting pictures and thoughts directly into their head, right? They've already figured that out. So I thought that was very, very interesting.
Can I ask you something about that, John?
Go ahead.
Do you think that Victor was also communicating telepathically, or was he just involved in a more pure biological scientist way?
Scientist way, but Victor did say in a matter of terms that he was in person with this being at one particular time, and he felt a extreme sense of like emptiness and dread to some degree, and yet overwhelming. Victor says that the scientists, the medical people in this program are not very intelligent. And the scientists have a high attrition rate out at S4 and S2 alpha because they can't take the ego deflation. And the ego deflation is something I've come to grips with is we are no longer sitting on top of the food chain. We are the trout, the deer in the woods, and the aliens and the extraterrestrials are the Department of Natural Resources. Do they hate us? No. Do they care about us? They care about us. Are they going to be crushed and destroyed if one of us dies in a capture and tagging program? No. And they're not going to let us blow up the planet. So it's hands off. We're the Department of Natural Resources, as glib as that sounds. I've come to grips with that. I do not
Right.
sit on top of the food chain. These beings do communicate. Again, they have a soul. There is a creator spirit, but it's not like the Leonardo da Vinci God with the long beard that you see on a fresco painting at the Sistine Chapel. But it is a creator God. When all of our bodies, including the beings, are vessels and containers for souls, and your soul goes, on in perpetuity for the betterment of the universe. I think that's a pretty astounding message.
Is there
Right.
any evidence to point to what they did with this being once he passed? Did they save his
Or did
biological
he?
material?
Yes.
He did pass. He did pass shortly. He did pass sometime in 1991, shortly after this interview. This is one of the last interviews in the series of interviews they did with this being. I can only speculate that since the other Ebens were in glass liquid containers, that this would be the seventh in the line of the sixth on level 2 of this underground complex.
Right.
But I have many statements from intel whistleblowers that there have been live or deceased aliens, some sort of biological material at Eglin, Homestead, Wright Pat, Kirkland, uh, 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 Holloman, which is Edwards, Walter Reed Hospital. We're also having at the new Area 51, which I'm sure is old news, is underneath the White Sands, the Dugway Proving Grounds. And it's a massive city-like underground complex where a majority of the deceased beings are. We don't believe that there are any more live beings in captivity, but I don't know this for sure, and I'm proud to tell you and look you in the eye and say I don't know that for sure. But I have been told by several people in these programs that they believe that there are no more living beings. And then you get a story a week later, not literally, that, oh no, there's five, or no, I heard there's three. So don't lay claim to what I'm saying about is there any alive or deceased beings. And it's believed that a lot of these beings make themselves captured, almost like a Jesus
Oh,
Christ, knowing he's going to be crucified, and puts himself into the position and sets himself around with people that are going to turn him into the Romans. It is believed that many of these beings willfully, give themselves up to be studied and to see and to interact whether humanity is ready to go to the next level. And I'm
oh,
here to tell you that since we bash each other over the head for a $10 toaster at Target, we're probably not ready to go to that next level. And I'm not
yeah.
joking.
You know what,
So,
John? I've talked to a lot of people too that have had very visceral emotion and emotional reactions when they see
yes,
this video. Not
yes,
and the thing is, and this is a big clue for me, they don't have those reactions when they watch the other parts of this documentary because as I
right,
said, and we have a listener question for you that I want to get to.
sure,
As I said, this documentary has obvious recreations and they label them as such and everybody can tell this is
right.
products of the time period that we are used to seeing in Hollywood productions. And then this starts and you can
Shake your
feel
head.
it in your
Yeah,
gut. You can feel
that's
it
right.
in your soul, no pun intended based on what we're talking about, but you could feel it deep inside that this just seems like something different. And I, we're so pleased to have Jon Stewart here with us talking about the alien interview, also known as to some people as the alien interrogation. And I've got some things I want to ask you, John, but would you
Go
mind
ahead.
taking a listener question here
Not at all.
for us? And I
No.
think that this kind of is this is from listener Alien Girl 111. Shout out to Nick, also known as Nikki Starchild, that does her own podcast as well. She had our own co-host CJ Derringer on a new special called Galactic Goddesses recently. So Alien Girl 111 wants to know, how, John, do you know that these are not just Hollywood special effects?
First of all, I hope people, I pride myself on being the antithesis of the typical UFO researcher. Everything, I'm the God. Everything I say is gospel, and I know, I know. I don't know anything for sure. I hope people can respect that, what I just said. With that being said, I have spent 4 years of the 5 years trying to find people to tell me the truth, special effects people in Hollywood. This film, please listen to me, has never officially been debunked by anyone in Hollywood, anyone in the government, and anyone in the UFO world. What do I mean by officially debunked? I have the alien puppet in my trunk. My uncle was the FX creator, it's in his garage. I have the casting call, the shine and show up sheet of that day when they did that interview. My uncle was the doctor on the beings left. I'm the guy. I have an order form for the dragon skin latex that they ordered in 1996 to make this puppet. I'm the guy. I have the order form for Rocket Pictures where I made the eyeballs. No one, other than, oh, it's fake, no one has come forward in 30 years, not one person, trying to, impress a girl at a pool party in Hollywood. No one in 30 years, person on catering, the accountant, the wardrobe, the FX creators, the animators, the animatronic puppeteers. No one in this 3-minute film has ever come forward in 30 years. And no special effects person has recreated this or can give us a definitive answer of why they think it's fake. And when you see it that dark, that was done by the production company. The VHS tape which was taken off a 16 millimeter film from Victor, had a bluish hue or tint to it. And when you see it, the bluish tint, you see the alien's right arm, you're like, oh, wait a minute. Nobody was trying to cover up anything. So you explain to me why 30 years later, no one has come forward. This has never been happened in ufology. This has never happened in any kind of a hoax, Bigfoot, Loch Ness monster, where no one has come forward. Looking at
John,
this
that's a
and
great
saying,
point.
it's fake. That is not definitive proof. Having your uncle bring me to his house and show me this alien puppet in his garage, that's definitive proof. No one has come. You mean to tell me I'm being, I'm not. You mean to tell me the person that did craft catering for that shot, that person never came forward to say, oh, what do I can't sign an NDA. I fed these people. We had blueberry muffins in the morning, coffee, and then I gave them pasta primavera for lunch. Oh my God, the doll was so scary when we saw it. It was filmed, blah, blah, blah. No one has come forward. You know who's come forward? 5 military intelligence people telling me that film, that being, is real. That's who's come forward, but nobody in Hollywood. And remember, folks, I don't care either way. I wanted to simply find the truth of this video, and I found the truth. And one last thing, and I'll shut up. Everybody in ufology, everyone in Hollywood, and everyone in the government told me for 25 years, prove who Victor is, you've proven the whole shebang. If Victor's an actor, we know it's a hoax. But if Victor is a government employee, what the hell is a government employee who didn't drive, came to the rocket pictures with the VHS tape by cab, a retired government biologist who didn't drive, choreographed and paid for that $20,000 to $100,000 3-minute production? Really? And then comes back 10 years later before he's dying and says, why hasn't anyone discovered who I am? I risked life and limb. I'm on the lam for 10 years. And all of these ufologists have done no FOIA request on S4, no FOIA request on me. Nobody's tried to see if it's a puppet or it's real. All they do is either say it's fake or it's real. A hoaxer comes back and challenges people and is pissed off at people for not investigating an alleged hoax that he perpetrated. Does it make any sense? It doesn't make sense to me. Well, we found out Victor was a government biologist. He was the caretaker of the 6 deceased aliens. We have 5 intel people telling it's real. I've emailed the one admiral in the room. I've talked to the widow of the doctor who comes in on the being's right. I spoke with the widow of the doctor on the being's right shoulder, our left. She identified her husband. And do you know what she said about her husband? There was a bone of contention between us. He never talked about his time in the U.S. Army Medical Corps. I never said Army Medical Corps, but that was on this memo that I was given by a whistleblower. And she said, John, all of our friends never understood why. And she said his nickname, would never talk about it. You calling me today, you have solved the riddle why my husband would never talk to me or his friends about his time in the U.S. Army Medical Corps. What does Victor say in 97? The doctors are chosen more for their silence than their medical knowledge. 75-year-old whistleblower gives me that document, and a 78-year-old widow is telling me what a retired 60-year-old or 50-something-year-old biologist said 30 years prior. I mean, really? 30-year coordinated hoax for a fat guy from Chicago? Give me a break.
To be continued. All things unexplained.
What's your hot take on Travis Taylor?
I've got an exclusive for you guys if you want it about the Alaska.
We do.
Okay.
Dr. Taylor was revealed to be the chief scientist of the UAP task force with the Pentagon.
So some of that, I think, sir, will save for closed session.
All Things Unexplained is free to watch on YouTube and listen to wherever you get your podcasts. If you would like to support our show, you can visit our YouTube store. Additionally, you can find us on Venmo under All Things Unexplained. Be sure to check out our website, allthingsunexplained.com. All proceeds from the sales of Dr. Mounce's books on Amazon and Audible also go straight to our show.